This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
And this is the 13th Annual State of Agile Report.
Thanks, Bob. Great introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I am Nitin Khanna. I am the PMI New Jersey Agile LCI chairperson. And thank you all for taking the time for this virtual event. We do give a lot of kudos to Bob to have this brainchild. It's his baby, and we're glad to be doing this every month. Now, 13 years in the running. You know, the State of Agile report, version 1, then CollabNet bought it over. And just this month, another company bought out CollabNet. So a lot happening there. But it's a very light read, executive summary, lots of pictures, lots of colors, easy to grasp. So let's take a look. Right off the bat, you know, there are a few continuing trends. And 3 of them saying, hey, firstly, Scrum and SAFe are still in the lead. Scrum being one of the Agile practices under the Agile umbrella. It's around 54%. It's lightweight, easy to grasp, difficult to implement, and people are still trying to experiment with it. You have people who are just venturing into it, to people struggling, to people who've seen hyper-productive teams. SAFe is one way of scaling, although there were other practices before that, such as LESS through Craig Larman and Bus Vodee. SAFe offers some level of familiarity just to roles and the corporate structure, and they've done a great job marketing themselves. We also have some other frameworks, which we'll see down later, such as the Nexus through Scrum.org, Ken Schwaber, and Scrum at Scale through Jeff Sutherland, Scrum Inc. The next part is, again, on culture. And I would imagine for any initiative or any mergers of company or anything that might disrupt technology, culture matters, whether in a profit or non-profit, the type of product and so on. I like to say, there's a funny quote, culture will eat strategy for lunch. If you don't have the mindset, if you don't have people on board towards a more agile organization, you're going to have some challenges there. So we'll see this in the survey, and we'll see how the metrics reveal themselves. And DevOps. DevOps is, to me, something that makes sense when it comes to engineering practices. A lot of the hyper-productive teams that are deploying continuously almost every day or several times a day using continuous integration or other engineering practices like test-driven development are just going to succeed. They're going to beat the competition. And you do have technical agile coaches now leveraging their skill sets over here. So broadly speaking, this is an ongoing trend. And I suspect a lot of this will continue next year. We'll have to see. So take us ahead, Bob. Next page. Some noticeable changes. Everybody wants to save money, right? And 71%, according to the survey, are people who've responded at saying that, yes, we are seeing a reduction in costs, or that's the reason, rather, for adopting agile practices. And 27% reduced project costs reported, which is fantastic. We want to get more lean. We want to make use of our skill sets and people really well. And agility is one avenue of doing so. And how do we really get this leveraged when trying to adopt or implement, particularly when you get into large-scale efforts? Number one, internal agile coaches. So if you already have somebody in your organization who might raise their hand or have familiarity or they're being trained and the organization trusts them, they can really be great change agents. I am sometimes biased, but that's just my experience, and I would rather you have an external coach in certain scenarios. But besides that, number two, executive sponsorship is going to go a long way. If you have the leadership in your organization giving a blessing and say, yep, let's go Agile, let's give this a try, then a lot of your battles uphill are just going to be easy. They're not even going to be battles. And lastly, we're seeing the company provided training program so that everybody speaks the same lingo. Again, I might have a few biases here because there are some industry standards and industry certifications out there. And anything outside of that might be an interpretation or misinterpretation, but you really have to see what makes sense for an organization, particularly if you're starting to scale. You want to all be speaking the same language. So I won't go through each and every paragraph here. Let's see what's ahead. Next slide, Bob. So we're going to be tag teaming a little bit here. Again, this is a freely available download. You can get it just by Googling it. Bob and I'll go left and right. And the next thing is around the demographics. Who took this survey? Where are they from? Is this something small? Is this something large? Let's find out. All the way through a multitude of things. So Bob, why don't you tell us more?
Sure, we'll do, Nitin, thanks. So what I did want to mention is that at the bottom of this table of contents, it's interesting you pick up these little tidbits when you read the fine print. Basically, there was 1,300 responses, and basically, since CollabNet makes version 1 software, they're saying that only 17% of the respondents were their existing customers already. So that's pretty good, because basically you don't want something that was done by all CollabNet customers, because of course CollabNet would be the best tool out there. So it's just interesting. And this survey is available. You can actually take it. It runs between now and the end of the year. And if we have time at the end, I can show you where the website is. And basically they welcome anybody to take this survey. All right, so interesting things to point out here. Response came from larger organizations, basically. 46% of responses from organizations of more than 5,000 people and 41% last year. So what that basically is saying is that the larger organizations, these two categories here, is getting bigger and bigger. So that means it looks like, when Agile was first started and when it was first being used, it was being used by smaller organizations, smaller, more lean teams. But now larger and larger organizations are actually using Agile. And then basically, if you look at the 50% of the respondents were from outside the US, where now basically compared to 48% last year. So basically, it's showing that the world is actually more and more people around the world are starting to use Agile. So that's a very interesting statistic as well. So basically, if you look at the survey, about half the respondents were from North America, and then the next largest grouping would be Europe. So it's just interesting statistics. And now basically, if you look at the demographics of the types of people that are actually completing this survey, the largest one would be Scrum Masters or internal coaches, also known as like an Agile coach. That's showing like 34, 35%. If I was to complete this survey, I would put myself into this bucket. That's where I am. What's very interesting is that the project and program managers, about 11% of the people doing the survey are from that demographic as well. So it's just interesting to see the types of roles that people are doing as far as the information that's being completed. And then basically looking at the industries, technology leads, but believe it or not, the financial services, that industry basically is the second highest. Thinking about it, think about the millions of dollars that are at stake, and they're actually putting their projects using Agile. So basically, that's saying something. That says a lot, because there's a lot to lose if a system doesn't work right when it has to do with financial services. And then the next interesting thing is the distributed Agile teams. And what we're showing here is that 78% of the responses are saying that the teams are not co-located. If you look at the Agile principles, one of them is saying that the team should be co-located. But what's happening is that reality is setting in, and with technology. And what's happening is there are a lot of teams doing Agile projects, and they're not actually sitting in the same office. So I'm fortunate where my team is actually in Jersey City. I'm able to do that. But then I have another team that's doing work that's actually in Chennai, India. So this falls into the 68% category, where basically they're co-located across geographies. So basically, we have a lot of resources in India. We also have a lot in the US. So basically, teams are made up of people that are not just in one location anymore. Okay, Nitin, I'd like to turn it over to you now.
Sure. Very quickly, Bob, did we want to take any questions before this and open it up, or
Sure.
hold up till the end?
I think it's a good idea to take questions as we're going. The other thing is, everybody who came into the call, your phone is muted, or so you need to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Hi, this is Mike Ella, and you know, it's interesting the figures of the groups not co-located, and what I'm finding is, coming off of a project that was running Scrum at the end of it to go deal with issues that came out of our go live, where we were all co-located, and then moving to the offshore model, the effectivity of those Scrum models kind of has diminished. So just kind of wondering your feeling on that, and you know, where you're getting respondents, are they actually running a true Scrum process, or is it sort of, you know, I hear Scrum Light getting thrown around now and stuff like that. Is it starting to where you're going to diminish some of the effectiveness of that methodology?
The recommendation is always to co-locate your team. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of value in doing that. But unfortunately, with reality, we can't always have that. And so you make the best with what you have. And using technology and the way, like, you can use media like Zoom or WebEx or tools like that, where you can actually have like a pseudo face-to-face conversation. It's not really like the real thing, but it's you know, it's getting better and better. But you're totally right. Being co-located is always ideal, but you always don't have that luxury. Did you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do have a short story and a comment. And very quickly, if you're not talking, mute yourself. Thanks for the reminder, Sunil. Around 2010, I was working with a hyper-productive team, mostly co-located between New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and one person in Colorado. And they were churning out stuff like unbelievable speed every 2 weeks, deploying to production. Somebody thought, hey, we need to do some cost cutting. Let's look at an offshore model. We're going to get 2 teams for the price of 1. And it just tanked after that. The people coming on board, of course, had to go through the motions of the domain knowledge, understanding the product, but also get up to speed with Scrum. So in this case, I agree with you, Michael. It can be quite painful going in an offshore model. The one good thing is, though, it took a while, and they scaled some of the offshore teams and trimmed them down, and then they got into motion and started doing well. But again, the offshore folks were all in one office, face to face, and that helped a lot. So at least if they're in the different time zone, they're all sitting together. So that helped. To your other question or observation on whether things are truly scrummy or there's some sort of a hybrid, we're actually going to see that in the statistics ahead. People aren't all Scrum by the book or purists, and I've seen those as well. And there are some organizations that have kind of tweaked it as well. And again, that may have some pros and cons.
And then also to add to that, when we deal with a lot of turnover on the offshore teams, I don't, it just seems that once the skills build up, the people leave. So those are things that you need to consider when you're following that model, because you might undergo all this great training and really invest a lot, and then all of a sudden, half your team's gone. It just seems it's just one of these things that I've noticed, and you really can't force people to stay. So it's just another consideration when you're looking at offshoring.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on then, Bob. What's next? The company experience and adoption. This is page 7 that we're looking at. 97% of the respondents said they're doing something with agile development methods. And for how long? About 10% less than a year. 1 to 2 years, 23%. The majority of them are in the 3 to 5 year. And then about 5 years, 27%. So it's a range, and I attribute this to, your maturity levels as well, whether you have the support, whether you stopped for a bit and went on. Now the next blurb is a little interesting. Percentage of teams using Agile. 4% said, nope, none of us are using Agile in the work we're doing. 48% say less than half of our teams are Agile, which is still a big chunk. Now, if you combine the next two numbers, though, the 26%, more than half of our teams, and 22% saying all of our teams, that comes to 48%. So it's pretty much at par, and that's a lot over there, and it seems more and more people are just heading that way. And right below that, you kind of get a sense of why. Why should we go the Agile way? What are the benefits? What are the trends? What's it going to do for us? Accelerated software development and delivery is the highest at 74%. And I still think of holding up and using my smartphone here. I get a blurb once in a while saying, hey, you've got an update, bug fixes, or UI enhancements, and so on. I get them every couple of weeks in smaller chunks rather than a big bang approach of, hey, there's an update 3 months or 6 months down. You can pivot, and that's where you can look at your priorities at 62%. And 51% say because of increased productivity. That's a high number out there. Then you get into the business alignment, quality, predictability at 43%. People saying we have more predictability at 43% is unbelievable, because typically people work in 2 to 4 weeks of time. Some hyper-productive teams will do 1 week cycles. But when you give teams an opportunity to just retrospect or inspect every so often, so quickly, and you give them a transparent model with just their product backlog and velocity, you'll get into a better sense of how quickly you can get something in the hands of your customer. Morale is also measured here at 34%, and there are ways of doing that as well.
One pee-pee?
And a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, you good girl.
Yeah,
Good
morale.
girl.
Morale is just
Yeah,
awesome.
This is my baby.
Yeah, and babies love Scrum. I have a 7-year-old who loves something called the Scrum Training Series. It's a free animated e-learning module. And a 7-year-old liking Scrum is a big deal. And she's not into corporate right now. Okay. So Agile Maturity right next to it. Most people say they're below a high level of competency with Agile practices. This was interesting to me. People don't usually like to kind of air their dirty laundry. They like to take pride, saying, oh, we're Agile, or hey, we're heading this way. But it's interesting where people say, there's room for improvement. There is an awareness that this can be a painful journey and we can do better. So let me go bottom up, no Agile initiatives, to considering an Agile initiative at 5%, to experimenting with something in pockets at 21%, 53%, they're still maturing. That means this is still taking shape in an organization somewhere, and there's room to grow. I'm seeing more and more people at the Agile training courses who are younger CEOs of startups. They don't want to go waterfall. They just have a small company, limited finances and budgets. And it's interesting. They want to just get results quickly and make it visible and pivot. So let's pause here for just a moment and open it up. Any questions here or stories?
Hi, Nitin and Bob. Thank you. I have a quick question. You said that you believe that the Agile, looking at the Agile Maturity, a lot of organizations still believe they have a lot to learn and were, shall we say, humble in face of understanding that they still need skills and so on. Do you think that's largely a reflection of the kind of people who are doing Agile and the whole Agile mindset that means that you're kind of open to change and improvement with every sprint, or were you just making a reflection in general that IT people generally think they're good at things?
A combination, in just my opinion. I think if you are heading in the spirit of agility, you do want to just remain open. It's hard to tell from the survey itself, so you could read it different ways. And what you're alluding to, Marcus, it's a great question. So is it, as I said, people airing their dirty laundry and saying, hey, we're struggling with this, but we've seen good results either in pockets here or other teams within our company or outside the industry? Or is it just a regular retrospective of sorts saying we can do better? So it's subject to some interpretation, and I agree with you, it's a mix.
And just to add to that, what I'm seeing is it's a mix, and plus it's the degree of experience of the people on the Scrum teams, if they're an experienced product owner, Scrum Master, or if they have a coach or not. Some teams that are kind of told to just go be agile are not as successful as people that are actually teams that actually get set up and trained properly on how to do it. It's really just a matter of how much training the team is given and what type of product owner the team has, because your product owner can make or break a particular initiative that they're working on.
This is Sunil here. Bob, Nitin, thank you very much for walking us through it. I'm just wondering whether in some way these results, they are skewed by the fact that mostly the people, organizations who are practicing Agile are the ones who are responding to the survey. And the people who are not really responding, they are, for most part, keeping away from the survey.
I don't think we can answer that, but it's a great question.
To me, that question makes a lot of sense, because somebody that's interested in Agile would probably be a person that would take the survey. But that statistic that I did show earlier, 11% of the respondents are project and program managers. So again, these could be project and program managers that are thinking about it, or they could actually be doing it. We don't have that information.
Yeah, this is Marcus again. One thing I noticed was, I think it was something like 35% of the respondents were Scrum Masters. So it's going to emphasize their sensibilities and their responses, I think.
Correct. And in that bucket were the coaches as well. So it's a mix over there. Basically, the change agents, as they say.
Right. It's the people who have a kind of a strong interest in Agile in general who are the ones responding to the survey. Not surprising, really.
Again, we're not, don't think that Nitin and I say this is the, this is it, this is the only thing. This is just one of the tools that are out there that you guys can use to make decisions as far as working with your company. And what I like about this is it gives you a lot of buzzwords that you might not even be thinking about. Like if you look on this page right here, things that Agile could possibly do: accelerate software delivery, enhance to manage changing priorities, increase productivity. I'm not going to read the whole list, but it helps. Like if you're having your conversations with management, you say, hey, these are the kinds of things that other Agile teams do get benefits from. And again, this would just be one of the tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Yeah, there's no question that it is an important report, and we take it seriously. At least it tells us where the Agile practitioners, their interests are let me put it this way: state of the Agile practice in the organizations where Agile is being practiced. So yes, but we should keep that in mind that it is not exactly the state of the industry in general.
Yeah, the numbers that showed up before help to kind of illustrate where the bias in the data might be, right? So you have a strong piece of software development. You've got people who are Scrum Masters, and interesting, we were talking before about the co-located. If you look, 19% are better managed distributed teams, and you have 78% of the respondents saying they're not co-located, right? So they're finding ways to use the methodology to be able to work in that constraint.
Yep, so we should look at this all holistically is what we're saying. So in the interest of time, let me move a little bit ahead. Bob, lead us to the next page. Given all that we've seen or heard so far, tell us a little bit about benefits of adopting Agile, again, using buzzwords, etc.
Oh, sure. This is a great buzz. See, a lot of times you'll have conversations with your management saying, okay, you want to try this Agile thing, like how could it help? And what came out in the survey, if you read the fine print on top, team morale and project predictability came up pretty high. And when I first got started doing this, I was always having conversations with people in Waterfall. They would be saying, how can you predict a product when you're changing requirements every 2 weeks? And I find that to be really interesting, that people are starting to notice more and more that this is a great way of doing that, because you're actually getting that feedback every couple of weeks instead of waiting months or years. And the number one thing is ability to manage changing priorities, because basically, if you're on a waterfall project, you basically have to go through this really stringent change control process because it's very costly. Where if it's Agile, basically at the end of 2 weeks, when the sprint's over, the product owner says, well, that's not quite what I want, you can kind of change. You can change your direction. You could do like a total 180. And then if you think about it, you really only lost 2 weeks worth of effort. You didn't lose 6 months. You didn't lose a year. So it's really a great tool. I'm not saying product owners should be changing direction every single sprint, but the tools are there, and the way it works, it provides that ability for you to be able to do that. So these are very interesting things. What I find is it also enhances software quality. So I'm a little bit surprised it's not higher on the list, but when I work with my teams, I'm always driving high quality, because basically you're driving good disciplines like continuous integration, test-driven development, automated testing, where basically you want to automate the manual processes so that you can do more, because you can't possibly test everything if you're releasing new software every couple of weeks. There's just not enough people. There's not enough bodies to actually test everything. So that's why you have to have good automated practices. So this is very interesting. And the other thing that again, this is in Bob's opinion, it's risk reduction, 50%. And that's because basically if you're really an Agile team, you're going to do the high risk items first. you're going to take a look at what you have to do, and then you're going to say, well, this is the riskiest. Let's give this a try and see where we end up. So it's just interesting. If somebody that, like me, I've been doing this for over 10 years, the types of things that are coming out and echoing in this survey. Any questions?
Yes, Bob. You had mentioned the importance of having experienced team members, adding to the success of implementing Agile. But are there any gotchas or barriers or expected issues that an experienced Agile team should expect to have going into Agile?
To me, what I encountered most of the time is the development managers, the people that the developers report to. If this is like their first Agile team, all of a sudden these managers no longer have a job. At least they don't think they have a job, but the job is totally different. And that is a major change because they're used to making commitments for their team and then coming down every day and saying, okay, where's this, where's that, where's this? Where with an Agile team, you're totally enabling the team to make those commitments themselves. And it depends, like what I found too is on the culture side where a US team would be more toward self-organizing, much quicker to get to that level, where a team like I have in India, where they're used to being told what to do, they're a little bit slower to actually start taking that initiative. So those are the kinds of things, depending on the team that you're working with. And then the other traps that you fall into is sometimes you have really strong tech leaders on the team, and they get into their tell mode. Instead of being more of a mentor and a coach to the team, they start telling people what to do. And all those kinds of things is what a coach can help you with. And also a Scrum Master that actually has experience. Yes, you can become a Scrum Master by taking a 2-day course and being certified, but really it all boils down to actually working in the trenches and actually experiencing Agile, and then having teams actually work better together. Just to give you another example, like when Jeff Sutherland came out with that book, Doing Work and Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, I was a very strong proponent. I thought, no way, that we're totally overselling Agile. But I listened to Jeff, I looked at what he was doing, what he recommended, and I actually experimented with my team. And I needed the knowledge of what I was doing in order to actually pull this off, but my team actually did start accelerating. It was an amazing thing to watch. Every sprint, the team got better and better. And I would attribute that to basically really driving the team coming up with one improvement item that would make them more efficient on each sprint, and coming up with something that's really meaningful. So those are the kinds of things that somebody with experience would help, rather than just telling a team, okay, you're Agile now, just go do it. And so those are the kinds of things that you would pretty much miss. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
All right, Bob, let's go ahead again in the interest of time. Got about 20 minutes, lots of material to cover. But again, hey, it's great that these are mostly pictures, right? Agile methods and practices. Ooh, I like the word practices, because there's still people out there saying, is it a framework? Is it a methodology? I say, you know what? In the spirit of diplomacy, let's just call it a practice. Scrum stays in the lead. That is truly a framework. I have to say that, and there's a reason for that. And this is also telling us a little bit about hybrids at 14%. An earlier question today was, hey, are people truly scrummy, or are they modifying it to some degree? And I suspect people at some stage will try to modify it, and you'll probably get into that 14% bucket. And if you can define some other flavors of agility, you've got, Scrum, XP, hybrid, that's, with the pair programming, the engineering practices. Scrumban here is subject to interpretation. I see Kanban as one framework, Scrum as another. And some people think just because you can bring in some of the elements of visualization into Scrum, that becomes Scrumban. But that's really not the case. Scrum just says, make the work visible. That's it. So people have borrowed from other frameworks to make this come alive. And then Kanban and some iterative development to people saying, I don't really know, but we think we're agile, we're doing something nimble, and extreme programming at 1%. So that's smack middle. Scrum is in the lead. I've got a feeling it'll still be in the lead, and then you'll get into hybrids and other things. So scroll up a little bit. What are people using? Your daily stand-up or daily Scrum, which comes from Scrum, or the stand-up came from XP. You're going to do some sort of iteration or sprint planning, retrospectives, reviews, and short iterations. That's interesting. They didn't specify what short iterations particularly mean unless I overlooked it. Industry standards are 2 weeks from what I recall, then 3, then 4, and then 1. I suspect people doing 1 are either experimenting or are hyper-productive or going through some pains. I typically work with 2-week cycles and a few teams with 3-week cycles. And a whole bunch of things here that we learned with the Scrum framework, again, everything starts with planning, daily scrums, review, retrospectives, and in between, you also do some refinement. So a lot going on over here. Again, I won't get into each and every one of these, but it would certainly help to at least have a consistency in your cadence, in your cycles, and just rinsing and repeating that. And you get better predictability that way as well. So let's move to the next slide, Bob. Engineering practices. Now, for teams that have been working for a while, you have got to believe they're going to start getting into some engineering practices, particularly if you're starting to scale, and particularly if you're going to go or undergo any kind of an acquisition of sorts. Technology comes and goes, things change. And again, with the technology, if you have some of these engineering practices, it'll ease the pain later on. It would be rather painful for business stakeholders to hear we have limitations in technology because of which we cannot deliver something, either because of some feasibility or restriction, or we cannot deliver at a particular junction unless we have something in place. So some of it is really simple. Testing, unit testing, coding standards. Some people have the standards within the code itself, continuous integration and refactoring, just to keep things really, really clean is a great thing. You've got companies like Amazon deploying multiple times during the day. I like pair programming, so in the spirit of having two intellectuals together, that's better than a ginormous 10, but you get with something more crisp and qualitative. So if you notice, Bob and I tag team quite a bit. We've got two intelligent minds. We both think we're great, but hey, we bounce ideas off each other. We've got different energies. We've got different stories, and we somehow find that we've kept a captive audience, So that's the spirit of pair programming. You find a partner, find a buddy, and you just work on the initiative together. So that's, again, a lot of the engineering practices. Let's see, agile and outsourced dev projects. Outsource, that means you don't necessarily have this within your team, but there's so good numbers out here. More people, that's on the right, 40% plan to increase use of agile in outsourced projects. So there's a lot you can choose from over here.
All right, so we'll jump, since we're running a little short on time, let's try to catch up.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Agile Successes, pretty much, it shouldn't really come as a surprise to many people. Customer sat is the number one thing, and delivering business value. Where I've found things to go wrong is when the product owner is more focused on delivering what the customers are asking for. And, that's great. That's great for customer sat, but then is what they're asking for delivering business value? And so that's where your Scrum Master that has done this before can actually help the product owner to make sure that what they're prioritizing is actually going to show business value, and you can actually line things up so that way when you deliver certain people call them user stories or product backlog items, you get that business value, because that's what that's why you're there. That's why they're paying. That's why the business is paying the bills. And then it's interesting here too is quality shows up pretty high as well. Then scrolling down a little bit more, how is it measured? Business value being delivered and customer satisfaction. So again, where I've stumbled a couple times is I was not able to help my product owner show business value, and I've learned from that. And now, whenever I'm working on an agile with an agile team, I'm working with that product owner saying, okay, when we deliver these things, what's the business value? What are we going to get? And basically just keep on bringing that up and making sure that stays forefront as far as why is the team doing this and why are we working? And again, you can read this report on your own. So I'm not going to go through all the other items on this page. So Nitin, let's talk about scaling.
They say cloning sheep, you got to be careful because it gets right into the DNA. It's easy to work with one team. It's commendable to work with two, getting that feeling of success. Getting three, wow. But I often use this metaphor, and some of you have heard it before, the movie of Michael Keaton in Multiplicity or Duplicity. There's a man who figured out how to just clone himself, and it's great, he's got more time in his hands, and he can do the yard work, do the errands, and spend more time with the wife and the kids. And then he decides to clone the clone, and the third person starts running into walls, talking a little funny, shaking, and something's just not right. And that gets into the core of it. So you got to be very careful heading this way. We are certainly seeing an uptrend towards scaling. This is where the Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe, remains in the lead, although it wasn't amongst the first to emerge. Some of the stuff here is also subject to interpretation. So I'm going to focus, for example, on the 16% Scrum of Scrums. I would have shared something, but you can even Google it. Scrum of Scrums has two interpretations, according to me. The first one is what I learned and was exposed to around 2012 with a gentleman named Michael James, a certified Scrum trainer who also mentored me, and said, the Scrum of Scrums is really coordination amongst team members of different teams where you don't really send the Scrum Master there as a representative. You really want to have the worker bees, those who are engaged, to go in and just have a conversation and see what are the risks. You don't want to have any kind of a power or hierarchy or bottleneck through a Scrum Master. The other interpretation of this is you actually have a Scrum Master representing an issue or the team, and you have a multitude of Scrum Masters talking to each other. I think that remains the more popular of the interpretations, so I would just be a little cautious on that. Beyond that, it's interesting, people saying, we're scaling, but we don't know how or why or what method. Maybe it's something organic or hybrid or something that makes sense to the company. Some companies who grow organically have figured out what works for them. It doesn't need a label. It doesn't need a formal methodology. Maybe somebody is saying, hey, that costs a lot of money or training, but hey, if you're doing fine, then just let's live with that. And that's the 19% bucket. But the don't know, I would say, is also with that 8% internally created methods. So where that contrast is, I'm not entirely sure. Les has a strong presence in New York City. We're right out on the East Coast, so if you're ever looking for a meetup, please look into it there. Craig Larman, Bus Bodie, and then you get into some others. The Nexus with Ken Schwaber, scrum.org. I was one of the first in his class when Nexus was being introduced. At that time, it did not have any kind of certification. Scale Professional Scrum, as it was known, December 2014. I am not familiar with RAGE. It's a very interesting name, Recipes for Agile Governance in Enterprise. But as you can see, there's a lot out there. And my general suggestion would be to grow organically. If you are considering scaling, it will come with some pain points. So let's look at some of the tips. What are people saying to recommend, or why would they scale, or what helps? Again, internal coaches, the sponsorship, the training. Number 4 is being consistent. Again, have your cadence, rinse and repeat all your events, and speak that common language. And what's the headache that you're going to have? And this isn't just for scaling. I think this is for just an initial adoption. The culture, always the culture. People are used to working in a certain way. Unless you support them and show the benefits, possibly through experiments, it's going to be difficult. You also have to accommodate for people who you think will just not get on board and how it impacts them. Scrum can be a little fearful. It is also seen by skepticism. As a coach, I worked with a team who was doing Scrum for a year and a half before they called me in. And they were still struggling. It was the better teams in that program. And it took a while just to turn things around. It's possible, but in that instance, it helped just to have an external person. But that was also helpful because of what you see number 3. I did have management support and sponsorship. We did have the leadership say, hey, we've heard great things about Scrum and agility. We're not seeing it as we'd like to. So we're hiring you for a little bit of time. Help us out here. You know, training and education is important, 36%. 32%, you need to have business representation. You need to have that product owner. You need to have that empowered person the organization trusts and says, hey, I can answer questions right now so that you can get this down the pipeline and get something tangible in 2 weeks. Compliance and regulatory remains a challenge, but I'm glad to see it's towards the bottom. That's interesting because over the years, a lot of companies were very fearful and concerned about tilting the boat. It took a while for people to open up and experiment. So it's still a challenge, no doubt, but it's towards the bottom of the rung. And if you are in a regulated industry or in such an organization, if you were to just reflect this to somebody, you can say, hey, we're not dismissing it, but there's some other issues that are barriers to adoption and scaling. So again, in the interest of time, perhaps I'll take one question. If anybody has a question or comment quickly, I'll do that and then give it back to Bob. If not, we'll continue on Bob. And again, we'll stay a little beyond 7 for an open forum. So go ahead, Bob.
What our intention is, we're going to end by 7 o'clock, and then we will stay on after. So if you do have some questions that might not be directly related to this presentation, we'd be more than happy to talk about them. So basically, we're at page 13, and basically this report is 16 pages long, so we're on the home stretch. This is an interesting page. I've never really seen that much value. I've looked at it from year to year, but what really stands out when I look at it, I see Kanban board, and I use Scrum with a Kanban board because to me, that's the best way to visualize work. The other thing that I found to be interesting was automated acceptance tools. Basically, it seems like that's starting to grow. And to me, that is so critical if you want to have a successful team. Basically, you want to really invest heavily in your automated tests. So that way, when you do your continuous integration, the team can kick off the automated test and immediately find out if they break something, not have to wait. It's really, really powerful, and it's really great once it all gets set up and working. And then looking at page 14, I found this to be probably the most interesting page in the whole thing. They showed Jira here being big based on, all the responses. But then when I looked on a table, I'm used to seeing how it was sorted by the highest percentage going down, but all of a sudden they changed the sorting order. I don't know if that was a mistake or whatever, but Jira is the biggest, 65%. I use Jira, been probably using Jira for now 6-7 years. It just seems like it's the most affordable solution. I've always wanted to try a tool like version 1, but we never had the budget for it. So the interesting thing on this page is 48% people use Microsoft Excel. So you don't really have to really get hung up on a tool. You could do a lot of this work using Excel. What I do is I use Jira, and then I export the data from Jira and then build the reports that help my product owner. So you can, it's a great combination, Excel and Jira. But again, this is the people that took the survey, and this is their results.
So a little bit of Freakonomics quickly. If there's one tool we can say organizations absolutely love or absolutely hate, would be the one in the big bold. Because you can't get out of it, right? That's what it is. But again, it's just a tool.
And it's a tool of what you make out of it. And then this is interesting where, this is a survey by version 1. They're saying that version 1 is the most recommended tool. Hopefully I will get a chance. I almost got Teach for America, where I was working before I joined BNY Mellon, to actually get a license for version 1, but it just, I wasn't there long enough to actually make that happen. But these seems to be the leaders, at least right now, based on this survey. And again, it's all based on your experience. Interestingly, Teach for America used a lot of Google Docs. They were like, everything they did was in Google Docs. So it's really how the organization culture is. So Nitin, you're on the home stretch here. Last page.
I am? What? Already? So Agile plus DevOps and value stream management. How many ands and pluses can you get in a title? 73% of people are saying they've got some DevOps initiative. This is great for people who are a little bit more on the technical side, and I think it also gives them a voice and saying, hey, as Agile you want to be, as Scrummy as you want to be, we want to get into some good engineering practices. And with that, we can show you the accelerated speed, the improved quality, reducing risk, and those are all the numbers that are in the blue further below. And surprisingly, 42% say this is important. This is trying to get the business and the developers a little closer. And if you remember that one of the earlier pages, most of the respondents were like Scrum Masters or Agile coaches. And they're starting to recognize that we need this stuff. DevOps, I suspect, again, in the next survey next year, we'll still have a presence here. DevOps has not been in the survey, I'd say, over 2 years ago. So this is still evolving. But again, it's an upward positive trend to see what's happening over here. And let's see what we have here. Improving DevOps practices. 38% say end-to-end traceability from the business initiative through development, test, and deployment. If you ever want to go back in time to see what happened, or you want to hold people accountable, you can get end-to-end results. And this also helps a little bit with your processes. Make sure nothing slips through the cracks, nothing is out in the open, and it's all buttoned up right towards the end. 30% say ability to measure the cycle time, wait time, bottlenecks of business value flowing through delivery cycle. This is also interesting because sometimes business takes time to make decisions. That itself can cost a lot. That also can keep people in limbo and possibly affect morale. 22% identification and measurement of technical risk prior to deployment. And this is what I was saying a couple of slides ago. If you get into good engineering practices, you don't have to say, hey, we cannot give you something because of a lack of technological features or limitations or the way this was configured at an enterprise level. So we're seeing some of those come out in these numbers. Value stream management, of course, I think this is really important, but for some people, they're saying it's very important at 40%, 27 say it's important. So that's about 67%. That's a good shift. Some people are saying it's not. Well, we'll see. That's just what the survey says. I'm a little surprised at that. But again, this is just my bias. I would think it would be higher. But that's what it is.
So we're almost at the top of the hour.